into the chat box, and one of the presenters that I just mentioned, or the executive directors or Dr. Sparrow working to manage the chat box, will ensure that that question is answered. We're going to do our best to track all those questions, try to answer those questions. If we do have any questions raised during our meeting that aren't answered during the meeting, those will be captured and responses will be included with our next set of minutes. With that said, I'd like to turn us over to Board Member Patrica for a board update.
Good evening, Chair Hertz. Thanks so much. I have a couple of quick things for you this evening. Your to use map 5 for redistricting. I'm sorry I wasn't able to make your last meeting. Something came up with one of my own kids, but I believe you all discussed the redistricting for school board elections, yes?
Yes, we did.
So we took that feedback, and I urged all of my colleagues to watch your meeting so that they could hear where you were coming from. And I think really the bottom line for me in terms of why I will be voting the way I'm voting is I believe it's easier for voters to have their county commission district be the same as their school board member district. I think it creates less confusion for voters. And there was some discussion from members of the public about the need to draw these map lines in a way that would allow us to better address the needs of minority students, and with the purpose and the goal of reducing achievement gaps. And we've discussed at the table that really the best way to go about doing that is through policy, and specifically with policy associated with, Scott, you're going to smile, the proximity plan. And we will be bringing that proximity plan back to DAC when it's in better shape than it's in right now. We'd like to be able to provide you with A or B options. So, option A is to allow grandfathering for 3 days, and option B is to allow grandfathering for 30 years. Obviously, I'm making those up as options, but I wanted you to be clear that those are the kinds of policy decisions that the school board will be making with your input and with the input of other board advisory committees to address issues in terms of equity and student performance. So really the decision regarding redistricting is a purely political one. It really does not have anything to do with student performance. So I think that that's really what I wanted to update you about tonight, Chair Hertz. I would like to take this opportunity to wish everybody a wonderful, very, very happy Thanksgiving. I hope that you all have something fun planned with your kids, or at a minimum, they all get to sleep in for a week, because I know that our kids could use it, and I'm 100% certain that our staff and our teachers and everyone working in our schools can absolutely use a week of sleep. So I wish you all the best and happy Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that said, we now move. Our next order of business is to review and approve our minutes from the August 27th, 2021 meeting of this committee. Those were sent out by our wonderful staff assistant, Erica Grimm. And I would be happy to entertain a motion from anyone either to approve the minutes, or if someone has a desire for a correction or change in the minutes, now would be the time to raise that issue.
I'll motion to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Walbert. We have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. George Miller has seconded the motion. What school do you represent, Mr. Miller?
Pine Island Elementary.
Thank you very much, sir. We have that for the record. And with that said, is there anyone opposed to the approval of the minutes as presented for August 27th of 2021?
Do you mean October 27th?
Yes, ma'am. Is that not what I said? If I misspoke, I apologize.
August 27th.
Oh, well, my apologies. I meant to say October 27th of 2021.
Oh, okay. I good.
Okay.
I go with that.
If I misspoke, I apologize. All right, seeing no opposition, the minutes from August 27th of 2021 are approved.
October.
Oh, I just did it again. Now you can, October 27th of 2021. Oh my gosh. All right, one more time. The minutes of October 27, 2021 as presented to the committee are approved unanimously. My apologies, not sure what happened there. All right, that takes us to public comment from any non-DAC members on any of the agenda items, which there is one, the quality points method of scoring grades for the middle schools and high schools that we're going to discuss tonight. Does any members of the public have any comments on that topic for us this evening? Seeing as how I've had no one step forward to make public comments at this time, I will turn the presentation over to Ms. Candace Oliveto, Ms. Brooks, and Ms. Huchin. Take it away.
Good evening. Thank you guys for having us on tonight. I'm just going to go ahead and get the screen set up, and then Miss Lori Brooks is actually going to get us started this evening. So if I could just get a thumbs up if you are able to see my screen okay. Fantastic. Are you seeing the note slide, or are you seeing the double screen?
Candace, we're seeing, yes, the double screen.
Okay. I'm going to stop that for just a second. While I'm getting that ready, if Lori, if you want to introduce yourself while I get it presenting to the correct screen.
Sure. Thank you for having us. My name is Lori Brooks, the Director of School Counseling and Mental Health Services, and I'm honored to be here with Ms. Houchin and Ms. Oliveto this evening to present on this topic.
Good evening. I'm Lori Houchin, and I am Middle School Director for Curriculum, and we appreciate the opportunity to review this information with you.
All right, Lori Brooks, how about now?
Perfect.
Wonderful. And for the record, I am Candace Oliveto. I'm the Director for High School Curriculum and Instruction. So looking forward to working with this group this evening.
All right, Candace, I think you're driving the bus, correct?
I am driving the bus. The bus is just moving a little slow this evening. Here you go.
Thank you so much. So we're going to start this evening's conversation with really the compelling why. Why did we start this conversation that led to this determination that the district will shift from percentage grades to quality points? And the advantages of quality points for the final grade calculation are really an alignment for many of the processes we already use, either under state statute or as we have set forth in our school board policy documents. So the first and most powerful advantage is really that we're mirroring what the Department of Education already has recommended and we have been using for our courses, our high school courses that require an end of course assessment. So it's actually our middle school civics. I want to clarify that our middle school civics and our high school courses, those would be Algebra 1, Biology, Geometry, and U.S. History. All of those have a state required end of course assessment, and that is factored into the final annual average as 30% of the student's course grade. And they have a formula at the Department of Education that districts are recommended to follow, which uses quality points. And we do follow that. So aligning the rest of our course grades with this formula really provides consistency for all of our grade calculation. Likewise, as you all probably know, a grade point average is calculated on quality points. And so at the end of the school year for our middle school students and at the end of our semesters for high school students, the grade point average is calculated. And those grades are factored in on quality points as well. And this is also the way that colleges will assign grade point averages is based on quality points. Now, the benefit for in-course performance for our students is that it actually makes recovery possible for our students that may have a struggle in one quarter And that can be due to a variety of impacts for our students. And they may fail a quarter. And depending on the percentage grade they had, they would be unable to recover even if they scored 100% A the next quarter in order to have a passing semester grade. And so this actually quality points would make this recovery possible for a student that really needed to do that improved performance to survive that semester and get a semester grade that would be passing. And to that last bullet on the previous slide, more about that point is the grades that students earn are actually a more accurate reflection of what they've learned and accomplished, because as we're well aware in state statute, the value of our letter grades is set for the state. So an A would be a 90 to a 100, a B is an 80 to an 89, and we have those 10-point incrementals until you go to the letter F on that grading scale. And that's actually a 0 to 59. It's a very significant point spread in the value of an F. And when we award quality points based on each letter grade, we actually mitigate that 0 to 59 so that it, like we said previously, a student could recover another quarter in that class and actually have a chance of a passing grade. This also takes into account student mobility. In Florida, we are highly mobile, even within our district, where we have high mobility, where families may move from zone to zone and a school change occurs. Even in Florida, we have students that move from district to district, and many of our district partners are using and have been using this quality point system. And this also provides consistency for our students that may move county to county within the state.
So picking up from there then is really, how did this all occur and what was the timeline for making it happen? As Lori just mentioned, during COVID, while COVID has had many challenges and we are still facing challenges, it really allowed us the opportunity to talk to other districts around the state to implement best practices, to find out what was working for them and their students, and to learn from each other. And one of those pieces that we learned was many other districts were already utilizing quality points for all of their secondary courses and not just the EOC courses, as Lori had mentioned to start this. The state already has the guidance for the EOC courses, but they have picked up that same methodology for all of their courses, making it consistent for students and families, regardless of the course in 612, that it was being calculated utilizing the same methodology. So once we learned that from some of our colleagues across the state, we went to work on what is the research, what's out there, how does this impact our students, and began running many scenarios with our own data sets. And time again, it proved to be advantageous for our students, regardless of the types of learners, because there were so many things our students were encountering. It proved to be advantageous and in their best interest. So we spent March and April of last year, 21, doing that research. In May of 21, we sat with our principal lead groups. So each level, elementary, middle, and high, have principal leads that serve as liaisons with district and all principals to really talk through our processes, procedures. We shared quality points with them to get their feedback. They also expressed interest, so we began to move this through our process further. In May of 21, we worked with all of our principals and our assistant principals of curriculum. And we specifically say our assistant principals of curriculum because that's usually the first place a family is going to go or a student is going to go when they have questions regarding curriculum. So it was important that we talked to them and brought them into this conversation as well. After meeting with both full groups, so that would have hit every middle school and high school, we went to work on updating our student progression plan. The student progression plan is the document that guides all of our work as a district. It has our courses that students are able to take. It has our guiding best practices for grading, for attendance. It is based upon legislation and statute, and we're required to update it every year and review that. So we normally would have finalized it in June and July, but we made a couple of those final edits in the month of July and then presented it to the board. Because of the way the board meetings are, we presented to the board at the end of July. A memo was sent to the board with the recommendation, and then we had a board briefing. And specifically, we looked at the quality points because that was our only major change that we had going in our student progression plan, as there were not a lot of legislative changes. In August, the very first meeting of this school year, August 2021, the board approved our student progression plan during an action meeting for the 21-22 school year. So it was at that time we brought this back up to the principals and APCs so we could begin to communicate this with families since it was being implemented for the 21-22 school year. So if you think about that, that left us our September meeting to work with our assistant principals of curriculum to make sure that all of their questions had been answered as we deploy this to our teachers. At the beginning of October, we did a video message in our email to all teachers that had the information. They received a very similar PowerPoint to what we're giving you guys this evening, and also an email that kind of outlined the why behind it, and a link to the next step, which was the parent university. We had an opportunity to record a parent university that was posted to our social media outlets for families. In October, we also had the opportunity to do a Facebook Live. And then once we had our first round of report cards go out, the school messenger and the letters went home to families. So that brings us up to where we are really tonight, though, which is November, and presenting this information to the committee here. Now, we know we just gave you a lot of information around our why for the shift and kind of our timeline, and we were very excited to hear that we are going to be able to use the chat tonight, because what we would like to gather from you is take this next minute to 2 minutes of, we have from November until the first week of January, where semester is going to be wrapping up. And that'll be the first time that families actually see the calculation beginning to take place. Because in middle school, a student doesn't have a final grade until all 4 quarters happen. In high school, for our semester courses, we're going to take that Q1 quality point, Q2 quality point, and an exam. And that's how we're going to get their semester grade. And the next couple of slides will outline a few math examples of what that looks like. But we really want to hear from you guys. Here are the pieces in which we've put forward at this point. But from now until report cards are released, the semester scores come out, what are other ways in which we could provide this information to make sure our families at middle school and high school are fully aware of the change? So I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes. And if you guys would go ahead and utilize that chat box, that way Lori, and myself, we can archive that information, gather it, and be able to really implement some of those pieces as we move forward. Guys have about 60 seconds left. And Mr. Hertz, I see your question in there about a comparison. We're actually going to do that on the next 2 slides. We'll go through a comparison of the change on there. about 20 seconds. All right, and that is my timer. So I do see a couple questions that came in there as well that we could go ahead and answer before we move on to the calculation and kind of what it looks like. So Miss Lori Brooks, there was a question in there that came up by a couple of different families about GPA and how this affects GPA. Would you go ahead and answer that one for us, please?
I'd be happy to. So our letter grades, our letter grades are our letter grades. And so what students earn at the end, and I'll use high school as an example, at the end of each semester when our half credits are awarded, those half credits and the corresponding letter grades are then calculated into, of course, the cumulative grade point average. And so a grade of A is calculated in as 4 points, a B is 3 points, a C is 2 points, a D is 1, and an F is 0. So we're still calculating our grade point averages exactly the same way that we have in previous years. The difference with the quality points actually comes into play about the quarter one, quarter two, and semester exam grades that average out to be the final grade earned, which could be a 90 to a 100 as an A, etc. So if a student is getting a numeric percentage each quarter and we're averaging that out, and Candace will explain this on the next two slides so you can see the difference between percentages averaging out for a final semester grade of A, B, C, or D, and also how those percentages converted to the letter grade and the quality point average out. The grade point averages are still averaged exactly the same way. What we're actually what we've adjusted is the way the actual semester grade is determined. So that instead of a percentage grade of a 95, 95, 80 for quarter one, quarter two semester exam respectively is calculated out as raw percentage, it's actually going to be the the quality points, quality points, quality points, the 443. And these next two slides will fully explain that in greater detail. So our GPAs are still the same. The calculation's the same. It's how we achieve the semester grade for our students. And then in EOC courses, the annual grade.
Thank you, Lori. So one of the other questions that was in the chat was, does this only impact middle school and beyond, 6-12, or will this trickle down to elementary? And yes, this only impacts our middle school students 6 through 12. And the reason being is, as Lori started, the state's methodology begins with our EOC courses, and students begin taking end of course exams in middle school. They also need to pass those classes and have 3 maths to be able to move on to high school. So the way the students matriculate through the grade levels changes once they hit middle school. So at this time, nothing is changing with the elementary grading system. It's still utilizing those traditional percentages with the letters there. So we will go ahead and move on to the next slide, though. That's going to walk us through a comparison, though. So here's a middle school example, and we specifically have 2 different examples, a middle school and a high school, based upon how we weight each quarter. So in a middle school, each of our 4 quarters carry 25% of the overall final grade. So if we walk this student through, this is a student in quarter 1 who had an 84% or a B. In quarter 2, the student earned a 72%, which is a letter grade of C. In quarter 3, not sure exactly what happened, but the student earned a 40%, which carries a letter grade of an F. And then in quarter 4, bounced back to earn an 80% B. Utilizing the previous methodology, we would take that 84 plus the 72 plus the 40 plus the 80, and we divide it out by 4 equal quarters. Each quarter carries the same exact weight. This student on their final report card would have earned a 69% D. and that is what would have appeared on the final report card. Now, if we don't look at the percentages and we move down to that bottom section that you're seeing, and we just utilize the letter grades, and we look at quarter one, the student had a B, quarter two, a C, quarter three, an F, and quarter four, a B. And now we apply quality points. So as Lori Brooks has mentioned a couple times, the quality points carry that same numeric value that we're used to with GPAs. So an A is worth 4, a B is worth 3, a C is worth 2, a D is worth 1, and an F is worth 0. So for this student, quarter one is now 3, quarter two is a 2, quarter three, they're not getting anything, it's a 0, that was an F, and quarter four, they're getting a 3. We take that and we multiply it by those weights. Remember, everything is equal in middle school. And that means for quarter one, the student now earned a 0.75. For quarter two, earned a 0.5. Quarter three, didn't earn anything. They still failed that quarter. Quarter four, they earned 0.75. We add up those 4 numerical values and the student comes out as a 2.0. When you look at this bottom chart here and you find where does a 2.0 fall? Well, anything that's a 1.5 to a 2.4 is a C. What is now on this student's report card is no longer a 69D. This student is actually earning a C for the year. So this is what it looks like for a student and the difference of the calculation. So that's a middle school example. Now, when we look at high school, while the thought process is the same, the methodology of the calculation, the weights are a little bit different. And you can find our weights in our student progression plan. It's listed there because for courses that have an end of course exam, the state tells us how to weight them one way. And then for all of our courses that are non-EOC courses, they are weighted where quarter one is 40% of the semester grade, quarter two is 40% of the semester grade, and the exam is 20% of the semester grade. So if we look at this example, very similar to the middle school one, we have a student who during quarter one earned an 82, quarter two earned a 70, and then failed the exam with a 40%. And these are typical of scores that we sometimes see come in. This student's semester grade would have been a 68.8 D. So the student would have earned a D on their report card for the semester and also would have for their GPA calculated in with a 1, because remember the GPA piece there. Now, when we look down though, and we utilize the quality points, we're gonna use the B, C, and F. And we work through the same process we just did with middle school, except for this time, we're multiplying by that 40%, 40%, and 20%, because that's how we calculate. The student comes out with a 2.0, which is a C. So on this student's semester grade for that course, instead of earning the D at a 68, a C is what's going to show for the semester grade. Again, now when we think GPA, because this is that important part, a C for a GPA is going to calculate in at that 2. So that's one of the pieces when we're looking at, when we talk about advantageous for our students, these are 2 very specific examples worked all the way through. There are so many other mathematical examples. I could probably stay on all night and tomorrow and we could work out different ones. However, I'm not sure all of you love math the way I love math. And we've assured that we'll stick to our time. But these are 2 very specific examples. What has come up, several questions that we have got though, are what about some of our upper level students? Them being able to maintain their A. Does this make it more challenging? Again, there are different mathematical examples, but I'm going to use a very specific one for you guys right now of a incoming ninth grade student. They are working hard. We know what it's like in ninth grade, that it sets their tone for high school. In this student's class, one of their classes, they've been maintaining an A all quarter one. However, they had one assignment in quarter one that was a 0, and that brought that student's grade down to an 83B. Now, for that student to get an A on the semester in our traditional grading methodology, they would have needed to earn above a 95 on both their quarter 2 and a 95 or above on their exam. By doing quality points, the student now needs an A for quarter 2 and an A on the exam, anywhere between that 90-100 threshold that Lori Brooks talked about. So this actually allows our high-flying students as well, who sometimes have a bad test-taking day, who may have those pieces where it just wasn't there, and it too, for them, allows the opportunity where that 10-point scale that can have so much variability to be able to get 2 additional A's and still come out an A on the semester. So those are just a couple of very specific examples as we think about how does this impact our students. With that, Lori Houchin's going to talk about, though, what does this mean for our parents and guardians? What does it look like on that lens?
So for the parent guardians, they will not see any changes. In fact, interims went out already with this change in place. So the change that they're going to see is that if they're used to seeing a percentage, they're now just going to see that letter grade. You can, however, as a parent and a student, go into Focus and see the percentage that generated that letter grade. And so this is the same for both middle and high. The middle students, remember that those are calculated quarterly, and high school students are calculated by semester. So there will be that slight difference. But right now, what you're seeing in Focus and on the interims and the report cards is that the report cards and the interims will have the letter grade, and you go to Focus to be able to see the percentage grade of which that letter grade was generated. And then this is just a slide that we used for Parent University that kind of just sums everything up that they've shared with you minus the examples. Candace, there's some call outs for you to put that last example on a slide for them, for the A student. But this just tells basically in just a small bullet points what quality points are, what do families need to do, and it goes over the information I just went over about how you actually can access the percentage earned in Parent Portal. It goes over what each of the letter grades represent numerically, of how it's going to be calculated, and then the advantages to moving to this system. So this is just a nice summary slide that we use to be able to have talking points with parents and students.
And then, Lori, I'm going to stop for a second. Lori, and Candace, there were a couple of questions that were asked earlier. If we can go back to that other slide and leave that one up there. There were a couple of questions earlier that we didn't get to, and we just wanted to make sure we addressed. How does this impact current seniors' GPA?
So again, that goes back to, or points back to our grade point average calculation is not changing, it's really the calculation of the semester grades. So if the outcome, as Candace pointed out in those slides, is that students have the ability to recover a bit more under quality points and average out to a letter grade that is more advantageous using the quality points grading scale, then their GPA is not impacted by this system. Now, yes, in the case she gave in the high school, that student actually got a higher letter grade. I believe it was a C instead of a D. And so, of course, the impact would be a positive impact on the, GPA. So I'm not sure if I understand the context of the impact on the GPA. Are we talking about the student then gets a C instead of a D as the final grade, because we're not changing the way we actually calculate GPA. That is staying standard. It's how we're actually taking the quarter grades and the assessments, calculating that to get the actual grade awarded each semester. So I hope I'm understanding the context of the question.
I will also say that for the high schoolers that are not freshmen, is that this is not retroactive. So this will not go back and change any grades that were earned prior to the school year.
So Lori Brooks, there's a couple of questions in the chat that are all kind of center around with that GPA piece again, as does it make it more difficult for our higher achieving students to stand out by not having those percentages in there? But really, if we think about like how our class rank is calculated, and that's all off of GPA, if we kind of go back to that piece, we're not changing anything on GPA. So when we think about class rank and how our students rank, those pieces will still be off of GPA. There are still the additional weights. We have not changed any of the weights for our honors classes, our IB classes, our pre-IB, our ACE classes, our AP. Those pieces are still all in there. So I don't know if you have anything additional you want to add to that, Lori.
And also the question about seat time, I would think there's no impact with the seat time. There's no change.
No, the seat time requirement is related to credit earned in a course. And then also there was a question earlier about absences. Absences can tend to impact a student's performance in their class if they're missing instruction or they're struggling to complete their makeup work in the allotted time frame. However, related to this exact calculation, neither would have an impact other than probably the stress created for a student due to being absent and having to catch up. Related to our high achieving students, we have to keep in mind that regardless of the methodology used for final grade awarding in a semester or year-long course, our universities, nothing on a transcript ever shows a percentage. It's a letter grade only. Our colleges, universities, even us as parents and our students will never see anything other than a letter grade on their own transcript. So what goes into an A, B, C, D, or F, whether it's a percentage calculation or a quality point calculation that earns them that final course grade, everybody just sees that final letter grade on the transcript. So that's why sometimes students have a 90, sometimes they have a 99 or a 100, but it's still an A, which we'll post on the transcript as an A. And nothing else would be seen by your post-secondary schools or even us, unless we have access to the focused parent portal where we can see the actual percentage. Those percentages are only known to students, parents, and their teachers. Once it's a final grade and it's on a transcript, all it is a letter grade. They don't even see quarter grades or exam grades on a transcript. It's just the half credit or credit final grade earned.
So as I scroll through the chat, I think that captured most of the questions that were in there, and really seeing those suggestions that you guys have as well. We truly appreciate your comments. We will be taking those back. I think it's a great idea about additional videos that we're able to post and post them right to our district page and for you guys to be able to share back to schools. So appreciate that as well. We are going to, it moves us to our next slide then. To see, do you have any additional questions? So we're going to stop the screen share at this time so we can utilize the process that Mr. Hertz had mentioned earlier with the reaction and the hand. I love that it moves to the top left in my screen as well. It allows us to quickly be able to see who you are, or again, any other questions in the chat. So I will throw it over to you, Mr. Hurt, to facilitate that process.
Certainly, and let me just re-ask the question. I sort of asked it, and Ms. Shauna Conway asked it, and I'll say this: I don't really feel it was directly answered. I understand the point that Ms. Brooks made about that at the end of the day, it's a letter grade and that's all you see. And I understand that the letter grade doesn't show the difference between someone who gets a 90 and someone who gets 100. Okay. But what it sounds to me like, in perhaps outside of some very small outliers, someone did mention there are some calculations, but it sounds to me like the whole point of this is to sort of improve everyone's grades. And the net result is if you took last year's scores and use this methodology for the same students, it sounds like we'll have more students with A's this year as their final grade than we did last year. And so the question is that diluting an A? Does that make it harder for students to differentiate themselves when you look at, I understand it's very beneficial if you get a D instead of an F and you pass and can matriculate, right? But if you're looking at the other end of the spectrum for the A students that are competing for limited spaces in colleges, do we just make it, what's the impact? And that seems to be the thrust of those questions. And I didn't really believe that was clearly answered, or is that a misunderstanding of what's occurring?
So I think Lori and I can kind of answer that twofold together. So there are additional calculations. So if we go back to that high achieving student, the example we utilized earlier, who has that 83, that 83 was the cause of 1-0 in a grade book. So there are times that we earn a 0, and because of that 0 to 59 scale of an F, it makes it very hard for our students to be able to bounce back from that. So here you have a student that is a straight A student on every other example inside their classroom, but received 1-0. And that student, even with all the other 90s, 100s, wasn't able to bounce back. When we look at the Q2 grade and the exam, in our previous methodology there, the student needs at least a 94. So if they would have scored a 93 and a 93, they would have come out a B, because when you average those together, a 93 plus a 93 plus an 83 with our weights, that student would be a B. But if I said to you as a parent and as a student, that student earned an A, an A, and a B, where are they really? That makes it that student is really an A student and had 1-0 over the course of 27 grades that really set them off. So it still allows them to compete. And when we look at our EOC scores, our state courses for EOCs, because we've had this process before, in those calculations, there are 4 different ways for a student to come out an A. When we apply this rule to all of our other courses now, there's only one additional method in which a student can earn an A. So before, with all of our EOC courses, it was any combination of an A or a B on their quarters or their exams that would yield an overall A. This adds one additional layer that a student could earn an A Q1, an A Q2, and a C on their exam and still come out an A. So it doesn't overinflate, it does add one additional. The same can be said true on the other end, Mr. Hertz. When we look at our calculation for our EOC courses and students that don't pass, there are 3 calculations in which yield that. When we go about based upon this methodology with all of our courses, we yield 4. So there's one additional way that yields an F. And that's where mathematically there really are. But for our students, when we talk about students and really everything we've learned over COVID and our neighbors to the south, which we get a lot of students from Collier and a lot of our students go to Collier, this is the same methodology they have used for many years. It was what was right and in the best interest of students, but without mitigating or making it in one way that now your high A students would not be able to outperform as they're trying to get into those higher level universities. Lori Brooks, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that really your explanation gets to the root of it. When we were looking at this and talking to other districts as well, the final result really was not necessarily a great inflation. It really was trying to work through aligning our systems with the Florida Department of Education formula for EOC final course grades using quality points. And then also really looking at that 0 to 59 mitigation for a lot of our students. When we're talking about our high achievers, and I was school-based at the high school level for almost 20 years. So I worked with a lot of our high achieving students. I was at an IB school, and our students are driven when we're looking at that particular performance level. They are very driven intrinsically to get the highest value out of their learning as they possibly can. And so our discussions really were around more of how can I ensure that I get the highest possible performance result for the effort I'm putting in. And for a lot of those students, this does not necessarily impact them in any way, shape, or form. Now, there was something in the chat box about it could hurt some students. And we really need to also discuss that scenario in all fairness. Does it have a negative impact for any of our students? And, you know, there are very limited cases where a student could be on that cusp. And if we use percentages, they may have benefited from that. But we also know that a lot of our students will look at what do I need and at what level to maintain my A, or also if I'm aiming for that A, what else do I need to be doing to get there? And they're trying to make sure that they process that through that system and that context. So whether it's percentages or quality points, they're still analyzing what they need to do to hit that achievement level or maintain it.
All right, and I see we have another question in the chat, and then certainly if anyone would like to, again, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, if you click where it says reactions, you can then click raise hand, and that's a good way for us to recognize people who would like to ask their questions or explain their questions first typing them. But I'll let either Ms. Oliveto or Ms. Brooks respond to the last question in the chat there.
So it started this school year, the 21-22 school year, and the first time parents would have seen it would have been when interims posted. So as Ms. Houchin mentioned earlier, when interims posted, it did not post with a percent and a letter grade. It just posted with the letter grade. Again, at quarter, when those quarter report cards came or posted, it posted with just a letter grade. Now, in terms of middle school, it won't actually have a complete effect until final grade because all 4 quarters will come into play for the final grade. For our high school students, we'll feel that first impact at the semester because based upon statute, we award credit at the semester, so a half credit there. So they will see how a quarter plus an exam plays out, which is why we were really looking for that feedback that you provided us about additional ways we can communicate from now until semester grades are released. And I think the other piece is, what do we do with students who have limited English proficiency? Do they get passing grades so that they don't fall into the trenches of low score averages? So again, as Lori Houchin and Lori Brooks has mentioned, this doesn't change our methodology inside what teachers are doing with students on a day-to-day basis. It just changes that final outcome at the quarter. So they would have still been receiving the same type of grades inside their classes with their teachers, but now on their report cards, instead of seeing a percentage and a letter, it'll just have that letter grade there.
All right, Mr. Rhodes, if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask a question, and then I'll note we'll have after that, we'll respond to the question and I just asked in the chat. Need to unmute yourself, Mr. Rhodes.
I have a video instead of, yeah. I posted in the chat, maybe I'm not explaining it clearly, but when you go to post grades, you hit use gradebook grades and focus. If you don't see the percentages, I think it's a focus issue, not like a problem with this whole change in the quality points. If you don't see if a student has a 69 or an 89, there's no opportunity to adjust the grade up that kind of 1 letter point to bump them up to that next grade. So a student who had an 89, but you know, for whatever reason, you want to bump them up 1 point, you're not able to do that. So they're going to get a B instead of an A, and that's going to drag down their GPA.
So Mr. Rose, inside of Focus for both at the parent view of this, parent, guardian, student, and teacher view, you can still go into Focus, and on that screen, you're going to see the student's percentage all the way through until that very final step of posting that grade. So you would be able to see that it is an 89 all the way across. So if there is an area where that student really did show mastery and it warranted a change, then it would be available there. So the change doesn't happen until teachers actually post that very final grade. Well, they push and it takes that percentage and only applies the letter grade. So families, teachers, students can see their percentages all the way up until that very last minute.
If I can add just one more piece as well, there are times, no matter what system we use, of course, that a student may get a 69 and then they make up an assignment after the teacher already posted their grades for the quarter. The assignment comes in that following week and the child was sick. And at that point, our teachers also have the same mechanisms available to them to submit the grade change if that's warranted. Once they post the grades as well. So teachers can exercise that opportunity prior to posting their grades if that student is going to be eligible for the 70% C instead of the 69D, but even after the fact, that's still an opportunity that has maintained just as in years past.
All right, it looks like we had Miss Ivana is raising her hand physically. Go ahead, Miss Ivana. Go ahead. Unmute yourself. Go ahead and ask your question.
Oh, that mute button, darn it. Okay, so I think I heard a little while ago, one of our fine presenters mentioned that the quality points are being used in college. And so what we're hoping to align what we're doing in our K-12, or I'm sorry, 6-12 to get them ready for their college experience. Am I right with that? Was that part of the reason for this?
We're aligning with how we calculate grade point averages. And I mentioned that just like colleges use the quality points to calculate the college GPA for a student who's enrolled in college. And of course, that alignment has always been there between high school and college. We're just aligning the way we calculate our course grades with the quality points and the way GPAs are calculated on quality points.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. That's good thinking. And I think at the college level too, in respect to the speaker who just asked a question, I think it was Mr. Rhodes, maybe. So I think the college professors will do the same thing as well. If they notice like throughout the term that the college student has progressed or needs some tweaking with their grade, they can do that. So at the end, they get the grade that they deserve. So I think that same mindset as we're doing it here is something that our students, our scholars can get used to as they progress through their education. So I love how it all just comes together. That's all. Thank you for listening.
All right, do you have anybody else that has a comment, suggestion, or question for our presenters? We're unusually quiet tonight, people. I'll just follow up one more time then on the questions we were asking. And I'm not at this point necessarily, let me be clear, I don't necessarily have an opinion as to whether it's a good or bad thing, but it certainly sounds to me like this is a flattening of the curve. There are overall, based on the examples that have been given, all students will probably see either maintaining an A or there'll be an overall improvement in grades. The net result of this appears to be an improvement in the grades the students receive. Now, certainly, you've explained a lot of ways that that's all a good thing, but you seem to want to say, you've said a couple of times there's no grade inflation, but you gave the example of how the 1 point difference, the student who gets the 1-0, that student will now end up with an A where they would have gotten a B. And I'm sure with a lot of other mathematical examples, there'll be similar things. this appears to have the net result of improving students' grades, which may be an absolute great thing and something we should do, and there may be no downsides to that, but I'm sort of don't understand why you seem to be emphasizing there's no grade inflation here, when respectfully, it appears to me that's exactly what it's doing. It's providing more opportunities for students to end up with an overall better grade at the end of the year, and I don't understand why you're saying it's not that.
So when we think about students and mastery, and one of the pieces I think would be a great topic of discussion maybe moving forward is when we look at that grading scale of 0 to 100, and it's one of the pieces that Miss Lori Brooks brought out, one of our very first thing. In state statute, the way it's dictated, a 0 to a 59 is an F. So when we think about our grade books, students who receive anything from a 0 to a 59 is considered an F in the grading system. So they have those 60 points that are failure and only 40 that are going to be that passing. Now, if we apply that same methodology, though, to our state end of course exams, an algebra EOC student, a student who earns a level 3 on their algebra EOC and is considered able to meet their graduation requirement, only needs to receive 35% of those questions correct. That student utilizing the traditional 0 through 59 in a grade book would have an F. So if on the state's methodology for our scale, for our EOCs, which are our graduation requirements, if a 35 is meeting those pieces because of the level and the rigor of it, when we're looking at a 100-point scale and a 0 to 59, we say those students are failing and can't pass a course for graduation. But a 35 on the EOC does. Are those two equitable measures? So grading becomes something very philosophical when we think about equity in our students and the standards we're holding them to. So when I hear you say about flattening, and I don't disagree, it equalizes. For me and my mindset philosophically, it takes that 0 to 59, where we say those students are failing, and applies those little 10 points for that A, B, C, D, and allows our students to really show, do they have mastery, or is it just impossible mathematically when you get 1 0 to actually bounce back? And is that truly indicative of your mastery and knowledge set? So that's why we say mathematically there's a lot of different ones, but based upon the scale that we use from the state, this really allows our students and the conversations with our families of where is the student showing mastery and able to be an on-time, on-track graduate? Because at the end of the day, I think that's everything that everybody on this call would agree they want, is students that are able to be successful out in the workforce and a true representation of their knowledge.
I think that's a great explanation of why you're doing this. So thank you for that. I see we have a hand raised and there's a couple of questions in the chat I'll let you folks get to, but let's go ahead with Miss Virginia. I don't know, Dureski. Go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question, and then we'll make sure we get to all the ones in the chat.
I think that clarification is really helpful because I'm going to present this information back at our SAC meeting tomorrow, and I'm at LAMP, and so we present. I don't know. I mean, I know all high schools have students as members of their SAC committees, but our SAC committee is heavy with students on it. And I think presenting to them that it's not just making it easier for you to pass, so slack off, but this is in line with the EOCs. I think that makes it a little bit, makes it make sense a little bit more.
All right. Then Ms. Oliveto, we have a question that said they're wondering if it will cause an adjustment for programs such as IB in Cambridge.
Sorry, I was muted. So no, we did not change any of our weighting in our student progression plan. The weighting is still the same. So again, just kind of like GPA, we did not change anything with GPA. I want to make sure we reiterate that again. I know that question came up. We are not changing anything with the weighting of any of our advanced courses. All it does is change that end of taking and applying that percentage to the actual letter grade and applying quality points there.
Right, and then the next question we had in the chat was, have state universities made the recommendations or given feedback regarding the desire for school districts to make the change from percentages to quality points? And they also asked, are the majority of districts in the state using the quality point method? I think you mentioned that earlier.
So we did reach out a couple of our colleagues across the state who are also utilizing it. So we do have others, especially our neighbor to the south, Collier County. That is a county we talked to a lot during everything with the pandemic because of the transient population. And then I think Lori Brooks could add to the university piece again, back to the transcripts and how this aligns. So I'll let Lori take that part.
Thank you. And also Hillsborough County uses it, and some of our, we're a large district, close to very large, and a lot of our size-alike districts as well have been using this methodology. So in general, the Board of Governors and also the Florida college system, they generally do not weigh in on our local policies. And really it's because the letter grade values are set forth in state statute, and then the calculation of the final grades are set forth by school boards. So by and large, they really, and because we're talking through, in my opinion, a nuance to how we're calculating final grades, they look at the face of the transcript and they accept the letter grades because the universities and state colleges really, they don't pay attention to how we are grading. We're under state statute and we need to do our due diligence to align our board policies to that. And therefore our transcripts in Florida generally have those same letter grade performances, but how we calculate would either be percentages or quality points based on if the districts are following the DOE formula or not. And then there was another question in that. Are the majority of districts in the state using the quality point method? Many of them are. I would have to go district by district to give you a majority, but we researched and reached out to, like I said earlier, size-alike districts, and then some of our local districts like Collier. We have a lot of students, as Candace said, that move between Collier and Lee. By no means did we feel pressure to do this. But when we realized that some of the districts were following the state formula, we really needed to take a look at that if the state is setting that precedent for us with the EOC courses. And that's why we reviewed it.
Ms. Brooks, could you just, I see the answers to the question about weighting and they respond that the courses are weighted. Would you mind just giving an example perhaps of like an honors math course versus a general math course to make sure everybody understands what y'all mean by weighting?
Absolutely. In our district student progression plan, not only do we have the state letter grades set forth and the formula calculations we've been discussing, we also define our course weights. And so our honors courses, each semester, we add a 0.02 to those letter grades for our weighted GPA calculation. And then our AP, IB, dual enrollment, and Cambridge ACE courses add a 0.04 weight for every letter grade earned each semester in each of those courses.
So if a student gets an A in one of those courses, instead of getting a 4.0, they get a 4.04, which will eventually lead them to having a higher than 4.0 GPA for the, for their entire, I guess, high school career if they got all A's in those types of courses.
Correct. So under state statute, we graduate our students under the unweighted grade point average because that is equal across the state. And then our weighted GPAs are district applied with the 0.02, 0.04. And that's how colleges will vet the rigor and the performance within the context of that rigor for each of our students. And then kind of another mind bender, our colleges and universities also choose to reweight all of the grade point averages coming in to standardize them according to their own weighting guidelines. That levels the playing field for students from around the country and also around the state if there's different weightings applied.
Mr. Engelhardt, you have a question. You can unmute yourself.
Actually, just had a comment, a couple of comments actually. So I'm Chris Engelhardt, I'm the principal at Cape Coral High School. And as the principal at a high school, we have IB classes, we have AP classes, we have ACE classes, honors, on level, your intensive math and intensive reading. So we really have a very wide range of students. I'm a proponent of the quality points. A couple of things kind of stand out to me. Unfortunately, we do have a lot of kids who they do get off to a bad start, say in the first semester. if they have a really low grade, what we see with those types of kids a lot of times is you see an increase in discipline and behavioral issues. You see a decline in attendance rates. And so you start to lose kids. And I think in a lot of cases, those types of students will fall farther behind, and it makes it harder for them to catch up. Where I think with the quality points model, it allows them kind of a fighting chance that second quarter to keep we can have the conversation with them about making sure they're coming to school every day. The teachers can talk to them about, having a chance to get that grade and to earn that credit and stay on track for graduation and things like that. So I think that's a big reason why I'm a proponent. I think when it comes to the higher performing students, I know there's some concerns about how that could impact them. I've been at the high school level now for 8 years, and I think my experience has been with the high performing students is, for the most part, they understand grading systems, they know what it takes to get an A. I really don't think this is going to have much of a negative impact on them. In another way, I have a daughter she's a pre-IB student at Cape Coral High School, and I know she did really well the first quarter. I actually like the fact that even though she might have gotten 100 in a particular class, for the quality points, she still does need to stay engaged that second quarter and not really slack off. She needs to keep pushing to make sure that she maintains that A grade. So I actually like that as part of it. I think it keeps your higher performing students even more engaged than the other model. And then the other thing that I've had as an experience is when you come to the really high performing students and you're looking at college acceptance and in that process, the GPAs are all very, very high across the board. And I think in a lot of cases that this is not really going to have a huge, huge impact on a really high performing kids. It's going to come down to their test scores. And then kind of my last point is that I do think it levels the playing field because there are a lot of districts around who are using this model. And I think that allows kind of an apples to apples comparison for our kids when it comes to the college application process. So there are just a few thoughts that I had as we're kind of going through this presentation that I'd like to share.
Thank you very much. I see we have a few more questions in the chat. I was listening, I wasn't watching. I don't know if Dr. Spiro or if one of our presenters is up on which ones have been responded to in the chat and what they'd like to respond to next in the chat questions.
The one that was in there and Ms. Lori Houchin responded to it, but just for everybody else was, why was this being implemented mid-year and not at the beginning of the year? It was implemented for the beginning of this school year. So it was board approved at the first action meeting in August. So it was implemented at the beginning of this school year. We just don't see it take an impact until those first quarter report card. So it's not a change midway. We've been actually talking about this since the last spring, and it started with this school year. So not necessarily a mid-year change of it. And then there were just a couple of comments in there about seeing those other examples. And we can definitely have Ms. Grimm, Mr. Hertz send that out, those specific examples that we've gone through above and beyond the ones in the presentation, and also the different ways in which students earn their final semester grade. And then I see more coming in, so I'm now going to look to one of my other colleagues to see if they've caught up, because I've responded that now I'm not in the chat.
Actually, we're all caught up in the chat box. The team has been answering as we've gone along.
All right. Do we have any additional questions that people would like answered at this time, or any other comments that folks would like to share with our presenters or our staff? All right. It looks like we do not have any further questions. So thank you very much for your efforts in doing that. And I appreciate you being willing to sort of respond to the follow-ups when we pushed back a little bit to say we didn't really get your answers. I could see by the questions, which is why I was trying to draw out. And I will say myself, Ms. Alvedo, I opened an Excel spreadsheet and ran your examples of the 83, the 93s versus the 94 with the weighting. It's without doing the math of the example with the weighting, it was hard to understand. So I see why people are asking, and I did it and changed the one number as you said, and you can see it goes from the 89 to the 90. So I think sending that out, and you may add that to your list of things to explain. I think that's explanation helped me understand why this is a good thing. I like your explanation of the one bad score shouldn't kill a student's whole year. And I think that example would help people understand this a lot better. So I would encourage you, I know it's tough to do it in the email, but when you do the link to the page, that's a great example, the way you did it with the weighting and showing the weighting of the 3 scores for the high school with the 2 quarters and the test, and the difference between the 1 point, how it makes. I think that was really helpful. With all that said, I'm looking for my agenda. I think that is all that we have. If we have no other comments, so that would bring us to any comments for the good of the order. Not seeing anyone that wishes to have any comments, I would entertain a motion to adjourn, and everyone can get home early tonight. I'll also wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Shannon. Do we have a second?
I will second.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. And I will remind everyone that our next meeting, there's no meeting in December, so our next DAC meeting will be January 26th of 2022. So I guess not only have a good Thanksgiving, have a wonderful Christmas or holiday season as you see fit, and a happy New Year. And I look forward to seeing everyone next year in January. Thank you very much for your efforts and participation. Be safe out there.
Thank you,
everyone.